Welcome back, Capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are looking at another packed week of football. It is week 8 of the college football season. I know we're almost halfway through already, but before we jump into this week's games, I have to remind you of the 75 or Die Challenge. All the rules will be on the screen and they will be on the other O&O Sports accounts below. Click in the description to find all of those. Essentially, if I predict less than 75% of the games correctly, you have a chance at $100 if you enter. And if I go over 75%, you still win. You get $50. Either way, you win free money. Go ahead and get entered into that. And also be sure to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Around 95% of the people watching this video on average are not subscribed. So if you could just hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, I would appreciate it. And jumping into our first matchup of this week, it is 17th ranked Vanderbilt facing 10th ranked LSU at home. Vanderbilt is actually a 2.5 point favorite in this matchup. What kind of twilight zone are we living in where Vanderbilt is favored over LSU? This doesn't feel real, but that means FanDuel has Vanderbilt winning this matchup at around 24-21. And this really is just a story of Vanderbilt's offense versus LSU's defense. Todd loves Vanderbilt. If you don't know Todd, he is my robot assistant who helps me pick these games. He breaks down teams to what they really are at their core, shows how efficient they actually are on offense and on defense, on the road and at home. And on the year, Vanderbilt is 3rd in yards per play, 1st in points per play, and 4th in points per game at 43 a game on average. But Todd has LSU's defense as the 10th best in the country. They're 18th in yards allowed per play, 3rd in points allowed per play, and 4th in points allowed per game at just 12. So it's really an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. So like we did last week for Michigan versus USC, let's set those two things aside just for a moment and look elsewhere in this matchup. Starting with LSU's offense, which has looked miserable at times this year. 97th in points per play, 71st in yards per play, and 98th in giveaways per game. And on top of that, just 71st in rushing yards per attempt. They've gone away from the rush once again this year, and it has not worked out in their favor. And on the opposite side, Vanderbilt's defense hasn't been bad at all, hasn't been elite by any means, but around 30s to low 40s in all of the meaningful defensive metrics so far this season. And my main questions for this matchup are, do I think Brian Kelly swallows his pride and embraces the run game? No, I don't think that's going to happen. And since I don't think that's going to happen, do I think Nussmeier has what it takes to go toe-to-toe with his arm against Vanderbilt's entire offense? Once again, no, I do not believe that's going to happen. Plus, Vanderbilt will be playing this one at home in what should be a roaring Nashville crowd. To me, this feels like a no-brainer. I have Vanderbilt winning this matchup 24-20. And next, it is yet another SEC matchup. It is 9th ranked Georgia taking on 5th ranked Ole Miss. Georgia is a 7.5 point favorite, which means FanDuel has Georgia winning this one at about 31-23. And both of these teams, I think, will be giving their best in this one. Ole Miss is coming off a terrible, scary game in Oxford against Washington State where they win by 3, but they're trailing for a big portion of the game, and it looked like Washington State, of all teams, might be able to upset them. And on the opposite side, Georgia has righted a lot of the wrongs since the Alabama game in the last 2 weeks. So like I said, I think we get the best out of both teams here. Ole Miss is going to use that last game, hopefully as a wake-up call that they can't just walk into games and sleepwalk and expect to win. And up until last week, Ole Miss had one of the best offenses in the country. Todd hasn't been their biggest fan all season, had them around mid-20s, which I guess was vindicated by last week, but I still think they're a very good team despite that. Chambliss has looked great in Austin Simmons' absence. Over 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns from Chambliss in just 4 games played this season. And on top of that, Kejuan Lacey has also been very good, nearly 700 scrimmage yards and 8 touchdowns on the season. He is their starting running back, and he has been very electric in games so far. But over these past 2 weeks, Georgia has begun to look like Georgia of old. They've looked very good to elite, both on offense and defense. No real weaknesses for this Georgia team to note, and that leads me to each of these coaching staffs. Lane Kiffin, I love the Lane Kiffin shenanigans on Twitter every week. I find those hilarious. But we learned last week Kirby is capable of his own shenanigans. If you saw the fake timeout clap, whatever that was just hilarious. I think it's a real sign of how good Kirby is at managing a game and really being able to turn the tide in his own team's favor. But in all seriousness, I do believe this Georgia coaching staff is better. I think they're going to have Georgia in a better place to win this one. one. And that place, of course, is Athens, Georgia at home. I think Georgia wins this one 31-21. And next, it is 6th ranked Alabama versus 11th ranked Tennessee. Alabama is an 8.5 point favorite, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 33-24. And yes, it is the third Saturday in October, folks. It has arrived. One of the best rivalries in college football is here. And like last week with the Red River Shootout, Texas and Oklahoma, I'm going to do my best to predict all the chaos that is in store for this matchup. Alabama is coming into this matchup as potentially the hottest team in college football. Really, ever since they lost in week 1 in Tallahassee at Florida State, they have been on a revenge tour and they've been doing very, very good on that tour. And on the opposite side, Tennessee is coming in as a very hot and cold team so far this season. Obviously, they have that shootout with Georgia in Neyland where it looked like they could win. Looked very good in that matchup, but they're coming off 2 close wins, both against Mississippi State and Arkansas. The offense is there. Joey Aguilar has been amazing. Both of their running backs have been amazing. Not a whole lot more you can ask for on that side of the ball if you're a Tennessee fan, but it is the opposite for the defense. Just 68th in points per play, 37th in yards per play, and 103rd in points allowed per game. They've allowed almost 32 points for the opposing offense every single game so far this season on average, but they do make up for that in takeaways per game. They're tied for 6th in the country with over 2 takeaways per game. That is elite, and that makes up a lot of ground where the other stats we just talked about didn't really do that. But it is the exact opposite for Alabama. They've been one of the most systematically sound teams in football. Last week, you saw the fumble coming out of halftime, uncharacteristic of them, and where that might badly affect a team like Tennessee, who has been so hot and cold, Alabama was able to bounce back and play very efficiently and end up winning that game. They're 3rd in giveaways altogether. Todd has them top 10 in both offense and defense, and he also has them as the number 1 home team in the country. So you might hear that and think you have heard all you need to and that you know Alabama is going to win this matchup, but to play devil's advocate, this is a rivalry matchup. You can never actually predict it. Looking back, Tennessee did go swing for swing, blow for blow with Georgia, but Bama has a win over Georgia in Athens. And I think with the transitive property, that means Alabama wins this game by 3, but I don't really believe in that. I don't think that that is a thing. I have Alabama winning this matchup 30-24. And next, it is 13th ranked Notre Dame facing 20th ranked Southern California. FanDuel has Notre Dame as a 9.5 point favorite, which means they have them winning this game at about 35-27. And this is yet another underrated rivalry matchup this weekend. Notre Dame has won 6 of the last 7 matchups in this series. And in the past few weeks, USC bounces back from that loss against Illinois 3 weeks ago with a big time win against Michigan. A top 15 Michigan at the time, now unranked, so can't really count that in my book, but still a very, very good 31-13 win over a solid Michigan team. And Notre Dame has bounced back from their 0-2 start. 4 games in a row the Irish have won. And here is what I think we can expect in this matchup. A healthy amount of scoring, because these are 2 of the top offenses in the country. A healthy amount of defense, because these are 2 also very underrated defensive teams. Notre Dame has given up just 9 points on average in their last 3 matchups. And USC held Michigan to 13 points just last week. I think there's just enough offense to where it's very interesting and it could go down to some of the final plays of this ball game, but there's enough defense to where if there's a takeaway, it could change the trajectory of this game and go in favor of one team or the other. And I honestly think this has game of the year potential, on top of it just being a great rivalry matchup as well. The quarterback matchup, CJ Carr versus Jade Mayava, should be one of the best we've seen so far this season. But what I think swings this matchup in favor of one team or the other is USC does lose Waymon Jordan for about a month to a month and a half. He, of course, will not play in this matchup. He's been their lead rusher all season long. And last week, King Miller did look good in his absence. But with Notre Dame coming into this matchup relatively at full strength, and with it being played in South Bend, I think Notre Dame does prevail in this matchup. I have them winning 34-24. And for the last SEC matchup of this video, it is Auburn taking taking on 16th ranked Missouri. Missouri is a 1.5-point favorite, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 23-21. And this is one of the most underrated matchups coming into this week because on paper, you might just want to throw this game away. You don't trust Auburn, you don't trust Hugh Freeze, and I understand if that's how you believe, but they had a decent performance last week against Georgia. Georgia is one of the top teams in the country, and on paper, I understand the dilemma, but Auburn does have one of the best defenses in the country, just flat out. The offense hasn't been good, but the defense has more than made up for it on occasion, and you have to pair that with the fact that this is not only just Missouri's first road SEC matchup, it's their first away game in general all season long. They've gone the first 6 weeks of the season all home games, and they have done well in those games, but for your first road matchup to be going into Jordan-Hare Stadium, playing against a defense like Auburn, I think that adds a little bit of an element that a lot of people aren't really talking about in this matchup. But going into last week's game, I said Missouri's offense was great. I said their edge rushers were borderline elite, and I'm saying the same thing here. This is still a very, very good Missouri team. Last week, 2 interceptions from Bo Pribula really gave that game away, but him and that running back duo of Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts has been very, very efficient and very dynamic so far this season. And like I said, the defense did show up in that game, forced an Alabama fumble with those elite edge rushers that I was talking about, but I have to rest on my laurels, and Nick Saban said it best. Jordan-Hare Stadium is haunted. Weird things just tend to happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and I think the weirdest thing so far this season happens in this matchup. I think Auburn's offense comes to life. I think Jackson Arnold is able to put together a very solid performance, and they're able to run the ball despite losing Damari Alston for this season, and I like their defense to come up big in this matchup. Once again, something you have been able to count on so far from them this season. I have Auburn upsetting the Missouri Tigers 23-21. And don't go away, folks. For the second time in 2 straight weeks, we have a bonus matchup. This week, it is 15th ranked BYU facing 23rd ranked Utah. Utah actually is a 3.5-point favorite on the road, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 27-23. And this one goes out to my dear Utes and my dear Cougs. I know game day might have neglected you, but you are safe here at Ono Sports. You are safe here in the capital F football fandom. And I had the pleasure of watching Mormon Magic at like midnight EST last week against Arizona. What a game that was in double overtime. BYU comes back from a 10-point deficit and wins that matchup. And Utah also gets a big win last week, albeit over a Sam Levitt-less Arizona State. And somehow, some way, we've made it to week 8 with a top 25 matchup in the Holy War. So let's just get into this breakdown. BYU has been borderline inexplicable this season. Jake Retzlaff leaves for Tulane. Bear Backmeyer steps in and hasn't been an amazing passer, but has been an overall very good player for their system on offense. And the defense also has been incredibly solid, probably the better side of that football team. And Kalani Sitake, the BYU head coach, has been phenomenal in close games so far this season. I'm actually about to coin a term, which means winning games you otherwise just shouldn't be able to. We're talking about Sitake ball, folks. We've seen some elite Sitake ball from BYU so far this season. And on the other side, we have Kyle Whittingham's Warriors. And other than the Texas Tech game, Utah has looked very good so far this season. Probably not elite, maybe not as good as some were expecting after, I think, week 3 or week 4 this season. But they have still been playing very well. Devin Dampier, their dual threat quarterback, has gone over 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns so far this season. And rushing the ball so far this season, they've been very good as well. Their quarterback and running back duo have combined for over 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns so far as well. And Todd has Utah both top 30 in offense and defense. And where I made the mistake of picking against the Magic Mormons and picking Arizona to beat BYU last week, I have to fall for it again and pick Utah in this one. I'm going to take that risk again. And if I'm wrong, I just have to throw my hands up and be like, hey, that's just Sitake ball. But I still have Utah winning this matchup 24-21. And with that, thank you for watching. As always, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the other O&O Sports social media accounts down below in the description to be entered into the 75 or die giveaway. Have a great week of football watching, folks, and I will see you in the next one.